Good afternoon and welcome to my channel. My name is Donna Smirniotopoulos and the name of the channel is Angry Taxpayer. Today is Thursday, January the 23rd, and I have some bombshells to talk about. Some of you may already know about these bombshells. Just to hit refresh for a minute here, on December the 9th, Senator Bob Duff, Senate Majority Leader who represents all of Norwalk and part of Darien, made a surprise announcement that the city of Norwalk was going to be getting a brand new Norwalk High School, and he posed with a sign. And there were very many elected members of the Norwalk Common Council, newly elected people. Lucy Dathan was there, members of the Board of Education were there, the superintendent was there, the mayor was there. And the announcement made very clear that the state had agreed to fund a brand new Norwalk High School and reimburse us 80% of the cost. So the way it was pitched to us is essentially we were getting a free high school. We were going to have to bond 20% or approximately $40 million. Mayor Rilling said if we bonded it over 30 years, it would not cost us anything. Okay. So subsequent to that announcement, I filed a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information request to Senator Duff, to Costas Diamantis, who works for the Office of School Construction Grants, and to other individuals that I thought might have firsthand knowledge of the plan. I wanted to see where the paper trail was. A $200 million project, 80% funded by the state, must have some kind of a paper trail. I knew that there were ed specs, but it seemed that those had just been put together in the weeks before the announcement by Jim Giuliani, who is a consultant to the city on these projects. So he'd been tasked with creating ed specs. Subsequent to the December 12th Board of Education meeting, at which Dr. Adamowski spoke at length about this new school, he also told the board that it was his prerogative as a superintendent to go ahead and continue working on ed specs without having a committee. So, I've been pretty hard on Dr. Adamowski about this entire incident, and I didn't think it was appropriate for him to usurp that authority from the Board of Education. However, let's be honest with ourselves. This is a fully Democratic Board of Education. I don't think that they're really interested in doing anything other than dotting the I's and crossing the T's for this mayor and this senator. But if this were a perfect world, and if Mike Barbas were allowed on any kind of a committee, we might be able to have an honest hearing out about what this new school would look like. But the superintendent announced that he was going to take this over. He was going to take care of the ed specs. So things were moving apace. And he also said at that meeting, and he was asked remotely by Heidi Keys, because she said, this is a surprise to everybody. It wasn't on the priorities list. He was asked by her about this project and specifically how quickly the board had to act. And basically we were told this was a use it or lose it proposition, that if the board didn't approve it and the Common Council didn't approve it, the deal would go away. We would lose the opportunity to have an 80% funded Norwalk High School, brand new Norwalk High School. So, again, I didn't receive any responsive documents for weeks and weeks. And last Thursday, I decided I was going to follow up my initial request. And, it did occur to me that maybe there wasn't anything, which I think is just as bad as having something is having nothing. Planning for a $200 million high school, 237,000 square feet, regional, with the goal of economic desegregation, to have nothing. That seemed to me hardly plausible. But in the event that there was nothing, or I hadn't asked correctly, I submitted a follow-up request, and I asked to see all email communication and documents and the usual gamut of things that you would ask for in a FOIA request. Meeting minutes, agendas, anything related to a telephone call, appointment calendars, etc. And I concentrated specifically on the 4 people who were alleged to have participated in this series of meetings that the superintendent spoke about on December the 12th. Those people were Senator Bob Duff, Costa Diamantis, the superintendent, and the mayor. Now, last night at about 6 p.m., I received responsive documents from the Office of the Superintendent. And one of those documents was a bombshell. So Catherine McDermott, who works for the superintendent's office, I believe she works for Christopher Sugar, who is an attorney who works there, sent me 3 responsive documents. The real bombshell was an email that Superintendent Adamowski sent to Bob Duff on December the 13th. So December 13th was the day after Dr. Adamowski made his presentation to the Board of Education, and this was a public meeting, although they were not taking public comment. So I'm going to read to you Dr. Adamowski's email to Senator Duff. Bob, after the grilling I willingly took last night and the mayor's statement read by Erica DePalma, it was very disappointing to see that the Norwalk High School project was not included on the state's priority list today as promised. The reason for the premature media announcement last Monday was the announcement by Costa that Norwalk High School would appear on the priority list today. Our supporters feel unsettled, and we are unable to provide answers. Can you explain what is going on? Stephen. Now, there's a lot of information in there, and it's great information. It's also very upsetting information. If you ever had any faith in Senator Duff's honesty and integrity, hopefully this will shatter it forever. Clearly, Senator Duff and Mr. Diamantis made a commitment to the superintendent that we were going to get 80% funding for this. And in fact, the press conference said that we were going to get 80% funding. So the school priority list is the list that the state comes up with annually of schools that are on the list either for renovation or to build new, and Norwalk High School was nowhere on that list. So Dr. Adamowski was understandably upset because he was pulling weight for the senator at that Board of Education meeting. He was talking this project up to get support from the Board of Ed, support from the public, and he found out that what he was promised was not there. And Duff's response is pretty astonishing. So if you're interested in Duff's spin, here it is. Dr. Adamowski, thanks for your email. What I believe is the case is that while Norwalk High School is not physically on the list, it is budgeted in the overall school construction number that Costa just put out. Now, you gotta love Bob Duff's dodge there. It's like the husband who's caught in bed by his wife cheating with another woman and says, you know, honey, just because I was sleeping with this other woman doesn't mean I wasn't thinking about you while I was doing it. So, you know, the high school is not physically on the list. Well, if it's not physically on the list, it's not going to happen. There's no evidence it's going to happen. And in fact, as we discussed in a previous episode, we need special legislation approved by the General Assembly in order to fund this. Now, the senator goes on to say, that's why the timing is so critical. What it means is that provided the Board of Education and Council do their part in early 2020 on moving the project forward. So what this means is there's pressure on the Council and the Board of Education to approve something that we don't even know that we have money for, that they have to put the cart before the horse here, which means our money is on the line. There's no guarantee we're getting any money from the state. So he goes on to say, I am moving the project forward and I am successful with the necessary language in the school construction bill this spring, a concept that has the support from the governor, OPM, SDE, DAS, Senate leadership, and Norwalk House Democratic members at this point. The project will then be backed onto the list once the governor signs the bill. So basically Duff is saying, you know, all is well. Don't panic. Just because I lied to you that it was going to be on the list doesn't mean that it won't eventually be on the list, but you got to make sure you have to continue to play this game. You have to continue to sell this to the Board of Education. You have to sell it to the public, and you have to sell it to the Common Council, because I can't move any legislation through until I have approval from the city. And as we also discussed in a previous episode, this isn't how it's supposed to work. we have a Board of Education. They're supposed to have a facilities committee, and that committee decides what the priorities are for our schools. Now, his excuse for doing it this way is, he says, if we did the state bill first, we would have to wait another year to be on the priority list, December 2020, and begin construction a year after that, therefore increasing cost for the state city. Actually, more likely, if we didn't do it Duff's way with the surprise press conference announcement, then it wouldn't be beneficial to him in an election year. Let's just call it what it is. Here's what happened. Duff was looking for something, a shiny object, to take our attention away from the fact that he has failed to deliver the funding we need to educate our new ELL enrollees, the ones who came here in response to the Trust Act that Duff supported and signed in 2013 under President Obama, the deporter-in-chief. So Duff can't help with that annual nut of an additional $5 million. So he's dangling this shiny object. And here's what I think happened. He met Costa over drinks or coffee or something, and they scribbled a plan on a cocktail napkin. And that's basically what we have here. Not even that, maybe just some conversations. So we are expected as a city to approve something that did not originate in any sort of official paper content. It was just an idea. So let that sink in. He goes on to say, with everyone's support, that doesn't make sense to wait for the next year. And of course it doesn't make sense because the election is in November 2020. He needs this now. If there is confusion, it may be because we kept going back and forth in the meetings if we would actually need legislation. Well, I don't know how they could have ever thought that they wouldn't need legislation for this. I'm not really sure how they expected to get this onto the priorities list without legislation. He says, I spoke about the priority list on Monday with Costa. If you re-listen to the press conference, mentioned backing it onto the list, which is why I noted the necessary legislation towards the end of the event. Okay, you little snake, you may have said that in the event, but your poster was crystal clear. Everything about the announcement was crystal clear. We were going to be funded 80% by the state on this project, and that's why we were supposed to embrace it. I'm going to go on and read the rest of the letter. Everything on the state level is moving along as planned, and there is a commitment from all parties there to support the concept of a P-Tech middle college, total 500 students, with 100 students who are out of district, most likely from Bridgeport, Stanford. Music and Performing Arts Pathway, 500 students, 1,000 traditional students, and an 80% reimbursement rate for a brand new school. The concept aligns with the state, city, and Board of Ed goals, which is why this works. Okay, note that he says 80% reimbursement. This is very important for people to understand. The state is not going to advance the money for this project. They will reimburse us, which means the city needs to bond the entire cost. Right now, that cost is estimated to be $200 million. I suspect the amount is going to be closer to $300 million. He continues, this pilot, an opportunity to build a new high school in Norwalk, is a home run for everyone. Well, I guess it's a home run for everyone who is running for re-election in November. It's not a home run for anyone who cares about numbers and who cares about facts. We all need to be nimble and flexible in order to accomplish the goal at hand. I just can't, I'm almost physically sick reading how disingenuous and phony this is. And this is to our superintendent. This isn't even to us. He's just like lying to the superintendent. I'm sure there will be bumps along the way, but with the great team assembled, we will overcome them. So, and then he says, I'm copying Costa on that. There are a couple things that we need to understand. First of all, the goal is economic desegregation, but the target audience is Bridgeport and Stanford. I would say that economically speaking, Stanford students are about the same and Bridgeport students are economically disadvantaged. So maybe the premise is that Norwalk students are economically advantaged, which our 60% free and reduced lunch crowd certainly argues against. So that's just kind of phony. I mean, the premise of it is phony. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, is that we have to bond the entire thing. And the state is not going to cover us for the interest that we would pay on that $200 million bonding. And they may pay us back over 4 years, but there's a project in Greenwich that just got off the ground, and at the end of 4 years, the state had only covered 64%, not 80%. So I am asking you all to hold the senator's feet to the fire, hold the Board of Education's feet to the fire. Scream out your windows that you're not going to take this. The lying has to stop, and I would like a group of people to ask that the senator submit his resignation immediately. This was cowardly, it was dishonest, it was disingenuous, and Duff needs to go. He proposed this project to help himself first. It has nothing to do with us. And, I think that the governor is also culpable in this, but primarily Duff and Diamantis. But Diamantis doesn't work for us. I mean, he does. He works at the State House, but he's not an elected official representing Norwalk and Darien voters. And if you're listening and you live in Darien, you should be mad as hell about this. You should really be angry. Please ask Senator Duff to step down immediately. We need honesty and integrity among our elected officials, and we're not getting it from him. I hope you guys didn't mind the display of bulldogs behind you. I hope you have a great afternoon. And my final parting shot is shame on the press for not following up on this. I spoke to Justin Papp yesterday about the responsive documents, and I said, why didn't you guys file a FOIA request? And he said, well, we assumed that there would be a paper trail because it was a verbal agreement. That's pretty shameful that the press would just take that at face value, not looked at the enormity of the project and the pressure that was going to be put on our Board of Education and on our Common Council and ultimately on taxpayers who have to pay for the damn thing. Pretty shameful just to assume, well, it was a verbal agreement. There's nothing on paper. The Common Council has already allocated $50,000 that was needed for Norwalk High School repairs towards this project. We're continuing to do this. We're now staffing a committee for the art school. All right, we need to put the brakes on this. We need to do it immediately, and we need somebody to run against this jerk if he doesn't resign. So raise your hands if you want to run against Duff. Have a great afternoon. Sorry this went on so long, but I had a lot of information. And ta-ta for now.